finished listening to Haddon Robinson's book on preaching the other day, and he talked about three kinds of preaching, and I'm going to apply that to teaching. The first is the kind of preaching that you can't remember. And that kind of teaching is almost worthless. I mean, if I can't remember what you said, what value is it for me? The second kind of teaching is teaching that I have to work to remember. And the third kind of teaching is the kind of teaching that I can't forget. And that's the kind of teacher you want to be. A kind of teacher that teaches in a way that people cannot keep from forgetting that what you said. They don't have to work at it. They don't have to struggle with it. They don't have to strive at it. It just comes to their brain. And one of the ways we do that is to teach like Jesus. And that is to teach in short, pithy little phrases. And I don't always come up with a good one, but I thought this week was pretty good. And so here is the big idea that I want you to try to communicate to your people this week. And that is, we don't have to see eye to eye to walk side by side. Would you say it with me? We don't have to see eye to eye to walk side by side. I open with a video you may or may not want to use, but the message of the video is by J.D. Greear, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, and he talks about how his vision for the Southern Baptist Convention is to be kind of a big tent organization. And I think that is a good vision for us. The idea that we don't have to agree on every jot and tittle to sit down and have dinner together or to work together as a denomination. And I contrast that with a conversation I had with a friend of mine a few months back. And as you know, I write Bible study lessons for a living, and most of them for like approximate curriculum outlines. But I have one particular guy that's an elder, a lay elder at a Presbyterian church. And about every 6 weeks, he teaches what we would call a large Sunday school class. I'm going to call it something else, but anyway. Anyway, we've gotten to be a bit of friends over the years. And I was asking him one time about Presbyterians and the various denominations and so on, and he's quite knowledgeable. I was really impressed. And I'm going to put a slide on the screen here. And he went through this denomination, started here, and then this location, and this was a key leader, and then they split over this issue, and now there's two denominations, and then this group got back together, and this other group split, and this other group split, and this other group split, and this other group split. And that's why you got so many denominations. My one son is ordained last week in the Presbyterian denomination, PCA, 1,300 churches nationwide, I believe. And most Presbyterian denominations are kind of like that. They're quite small. And my son, the other son, was explaining to me the reason for that is there is a belief behind the belief. You see, they split over certain beliefs, but they all agree on one thing. And what they agree on is we got to see eye to eye in order to walk side by side. And I want to argue, according to the passage we're going to look at today, you don't actually have to see eye to eye to walk side by side. That in Presbyterian world, there's this underlying belief that we have to agree on every jot and tittle. And if we don't agree on every jot and tittle, then we can't walk together. And I think we need to be very careful about avoiding that kind of thinking. And this shows up in theological issues. It shows up in church issues. It shows up in normal issues. I wonder if you've ever had the experiences I've had, where you were in, say, the backseat of a car with a couple, and let's say he's driving and he turns left somewhere, and she says to him, "Why'd you turn left there?" And he says, "Well, this is the way I wanted to go." "Well, it's better to go this other way." And they get in some big squabble over something stupid. And it happens all the time where she spends a little bit of money on something, and maybe it's not a great deal of money. And he says, "Why did you spend the money on that?" And I say to my wife, if you want to spend a small amount of money on stupid stuff, you can do so. And she lets me spend probably more than a small amount of money on stupid stuff. And we came to an agreement a long time ago. We don't have to see eye to eye to walk side by side. We don't have to agree on everything. I think it was Bill Gothard years ago that said where two people agree on everything, one of them is not necessary. All right, so let's dive into our text. Romans 14, we're going to look at beginning in verse 1. Except the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. There are a gazillion disputable matters, only a few main things, but a gazillion disputable matters. And he says, don't quarrel about those disputable matters. You see this word translated except is translated a wide variety of ways. This chart, I'll show you these charts pretty regularly, by the way, generated by Logos Bible software. And that's what I call a vertical word study, where we'll go down into the Greek and ask the question, how is this word translated in other places where it is used? And you have to choose one particular translation. You can choose from among a dozen or so. But this happens to be the NIV. And you can see where it's translated accepted in this case, welcome, took aside, rounded up. Notice this one on the right side. You haven't eaten anything and the one before ate. And one of the ways we show acceptance to one another is we eat together. It reminds me of my mom when I travel. She'll always say, "Have you had something to eat?" And it's a expression of acceptance. This Greek dictionary says to receive to oneself, to admit to one's society, to fellowship, to receive and treat with kindness. Now, there are actually three circles that we could look at, and we're primarily talking about the first one, the biggest one, and that is the circle of people that we would eat with, the circle of people that we would call friends, the circle of people that we would do things with. Now, there's two other smaller circles, and those are the circles of people we would worship with. That is the circle of people, I don't mean worship in the strict sense of the word, but worship in the sense of they would be a member of my church. And by definition, that's going to be a little narrower circle. In my church, we do kind of an old-fashioned thing. We do this, what we call a fifth Sunday sing. Have you ever heard of that? Maybe in old-fashioned churches you're familiar with. Well, my little church, we still do that. And we cooperate with other churches up and down the valley and non-Baptist churches. Now, these are churches that we're happy to sing with. It probably wouldn't work for some of these people to be in the same churches with us. Our theology is diverse enough that it would be hard for us to call the same pastor, and it would just cause conflict. And so these are people we can't worship with, but these are people we can eat with. And in this case, we can worship with once a quarter or so. And so there are people that we can eat with, and that's primarily what he's talking about, people that we can worship with, and then people that we can work with. You know, in my state convention, we have to agree on kind of what is our theology. We're gonna do camps, for example, every summer, and we got to agree on our theology so we can figure out who's going to preach at those camps. And so, in a local church or in a denomination, we may have some narrower circles because these are people we're worshiping with, these are people we're working with, and we're doing things with, and we're making theological decisions together. As a denomination, we have to agree on certain theological issues if we're going to pool our money together to hire seminary professors and hire missionaries and so on. And as a couple, sometimes you have to agree. Sometimes you can't just agree to disagree. You're going to decide we're going to go on vacation here or there, or we're not going to go on vacation at all, but we have to decide. But the big idea is, as much as possible, we want to enlarge the place of your tent. I'll get to it in a moment, but we want to try to make that circle as wide as possible and be accepting and as tolerant as we can possibly be. Enlarge the place of your tent, Isaiah 54:2 says, stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen your stakes. And strictly speaking, this verse is talking about something else. But I think it applies to this idea that we want to try to have a wide circle as possible, particularly in who we will accept and who we will eat with and who we will call a brother in Christ. Now, Amos 3:3 says, do two walk together unless they have agreed to do so. And that's saying that in some matters, a couple, a church, a denomination have to agree on certain things in order to walk together. All right, back to Romans 14. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. Now, this could be referring to one or two things. It could be referring to meat offered to idols. And just imagine that you grew up in a home where you went to the idol temple every week, and the situation was there, we brought some meat and we offered to the idols, and some of it they burned up on the altar, but some of it they ended up selling in the temple. And there was this whole ritual, and you were part of that your whole life, and God gloriously save you from that. And now you want to go back to that temple and buy some of that meat and support that pagan temple through buying that meat. It's not hard to imagine how that'd be offensive to many. Now, some people would look at it and would say, well, you know what? These idols don't mean nothing. There's nothing to these idols. And this is the best meat in town, and it's a good price in town, and I want to be a good steward of my money, and the idol doesn't mean anything to me, so I want to eat some of this meat. It could refer to that. Or it could refer to a Jewish context where they were very scrupulous about what kind of meat they ate, and this was very, very important to them. And sometimes you have a dish, you have like a stew or something, and you can't be completely sure what kind of meat is in there. And so they just said, you know what, let's just don't eat any meat at all. But the point is, there was people who said, only meat eaters are in the circle, and those of you who don't eat meat are outside of the circle. And there were others who said, those who don't eat meat are in our circle, and you are on the outside. You are on the outside of that circle. Verse 3, the one who eats everything must not treat with contempt was not look down. I love that saying by C.S. Lewis. He says, those who are constantly looking down on others cannot see what is above them, who is above them. Those who eat everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not, and the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. This word contempt, let's look at a vertical word study on this, going down into the Greek and looking how it's translated in other places. Sometimes treat with contempt, sometimes look down upon, ridicule, rejected, despise. Look again at the one on the right there, amounts to nothing. It's to treat someone because they disagree with me that they amount to nothing. And Paul said you should not do that. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master servant they stand or fall, for they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. And this reminds me of the question, have you ever noticed how popular a pastime that judging is? How popular it is, how common it is for someone to look at someone else and say, man, you're doing it all wrong, you're thinking it all wrong, you're behaving it all wrong. I think I may have told you or not, I don't know, but a month or so ago I bought my church gave me a little money for a Christmas birthday present, and I bought a drone, and I've been having some fun out flying that. I'll show you a little video of some hiking and droning I did the other day. But at any rate, there's a place near us, it's a military base, and it's illegal to fly the drone out there. It's not completely clear where it is, and some complexity on that. And so I was trying to sort all that out the other day, and I posted on a Facebook group about droning, and I just curious. I thought, what bad thing is going to happen if I end up flying my drone over into an illegal area? I don't think I'm possibly doing any actual harm. I'm flying this fairly low, and so I can't imagine an airplane is flying over, or a helicopter's flying over, or anything. But I don't want to get myself in trouble, so I posted this on there and stirred up quite a bit of debate and questions about that. But one person said he actually went to my personal Facebook profile, and he said, I see that you're a pastor, and you pastors, you're always wanting to do something illegal. And what's up with you pastors saying that you preach the gospel and you stand for goodness and so on, and yet you want to go out there and fly that drone somewhere illegally? And I want to say, yes, I do preach the gospel. I preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, who said, judge not, lest you be judged. But there's something in all of us that wants to judge. One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. So we talked first about diet. Now we're talking about days. And the situation there was, of course, in the Jewish community, they worshiped on Saturday, which Seventh-day Adventists still did today. And fairly early on in church history, there was an evolution into worshiping on Sunday. But it was fairly early on, but it took a little while. And you can imagine that if you were a Gentile believer, Saturday doesn't mean anything to you, and you think, I'm going to worship God, I'm going to worship Jesus, I'm going to worship Jesus who raised from the dead, and so I want to do it on the day that he rose from the dead. I want to do it on Sunday. And the Jews said, no, we knew God gave us Saturday as the day of worship, and Jesus never said to us that we ought to change that to Sunday, and what are you doing thinking about changing it to Sunday? And then some people said, it doesn't matter what day of the week we worship. I was on church staff. We grew from one service in one Sunday school to 4 services in 4 Sunday schools, and including one on Saturday night. I remember, especially our 9:45 service, we just kept filling that thing up, and we had this feeling that every time we could empty a seat in that 9:45 service, we'd fill it with a lost person who needed to hear the gospel. And so we were constantly trying to talk people out of attending that particular worship service and one of the other service, and particularly the Saturday night service. And I remember this one particular man, good a friend of mine, and deeply respect him, but we asked him, because he taught a big Sunday school class, and we knew that if he went to Saturday night, a good number of people would go with him. And so he agreed to do that. And he agreed 6 months that he'd go to worship on Saturday night. I remember after 6 months, I remember talking to him, and I was hoping that after he tried it for 6 months, and he would get over this love affair he had with Sunday morning. But after 6 months, he came to me, we sat down and we had lunch together, and he said, Josh, I agree with what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the motive of what you're about, but I tell you, my soul is just hardwired to Sunday morning, and I just cannot stand the thought that my neighbors will see my car in my driveway on Sunday morning and think that I'm not going to church and so on. And me sleeping in on Sunday morning, he said the truth is I will sometimes come on Saturday and Sunday, because it's just so inbred into my tradition and the way I think about church. And here's an example of someone Sunday morning was just special to to him. Sunday morning worship was just special to him, and they dealt with that same thing back in the day. So for these people, there were certain days that were special, and others, people on the outside, they thought it was on the outside that all days were alike. And then the people who thought all days were alike, they said, these are the ones we accept, and those are the ones who say certain days are special, they're on the outside. And Paul said, notice this verse right here, each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. He said, don't quit thinking. He didn't say, just quit thinking about it. He didn't say it doesn't matter. He said, think about it, wrestle with it, articulate your belief, come to a firm conviction about what you believe of this. Be fully convinced in your own mind about differing points of view. Well, I'm going to stop my reading there, but I want to read you a post in just a second that I saw on Facebook last week of somebody that I think got this right. And it has to do with the topic of women in ministry. And before I read this post, I just want you to think about the divergent views we have in women in ministry. For example, would you believe that it's okay for a woman to teach a Sunday school class if it was just women? Would you believe it's okay for a woman to teach a Sunday school class of boys and girls as long as they're children? What about junior high age? What about senior high age? What could she be a youth minister? Could she be a youth minister if we had two youth ministers, say a women's youth minister and a male youth minister and a female? Maybe you had one main youth minister and then you had some interns, one that was a female and one that was a male. Could you be a female and be a minister of education like my mother was? And could you give a testimony in the pulpit? Could you preach one time? Could you be an associate pastor? Could you visit the hospital? Now, here's my real question. What do you think the odds are that everybody in your room would agree on all those? And of course, the one we didn't talk about is, could a woman be a senior pastor? Well, this is an issue that I think very well might divide us as Southern Baptists in days to come, and it is in fact dividing us this summer. Someone has asked a woman to speak at the pastors' conference just before the Southern Baptist Convention this summer, and I want to read you the statement of someone that I think got it right. So here it is. For the three people wondering about my take on the current SBC controversies, here is my three takes. Number one, here's an idea. If you don't like a speaker at a session at the pastors' conference, just don't go. Lord knows I've done that many times. The tent should be bigger than my personal preference. Go to Disney World instead. If that isn't enough, then run someone that you like for the presidency of the pastors' conference. This hyper fear of women in ministry is sad. If Beth Moore wanted to do so, she could start a church in any of our cities, and it would be the largest church overnight. But she hadn't done so because she didn't want to. Instead of belittling her, we should bless her and others like her who are a great gift to the kingdom. And the big idea is, and I think this person got this right, we don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to see eye to eye to walk side by side. It is true in our families. It is true in our churches. It is true in our denomination. And I think we ought to start with the bias. There's some things that we have to agree on. And if I had a little more time, we'd get into that. Essentially, that is the deity of Christ. That is the authority of Scripture. And that is the idea of salvation by grace through faith. And there's some things that we have to agree on, and the list may be a little longer than that, depending on what group, denomination, or church, or what group you're talking about. But generally speaking, we should not feel like we have to judge every nitpicking bit of theology or difference of opinion. And if your wife wants to do it a different way, let her do it a different way. And we do not have to see eye to eye to walk side by side.